Moving ahead now to page 252 and 253, the next question that the chapter is asking us is, how is it possible that we can recognize words so rapidly as we do while they're being spoken to us? I mean, consider right now how fast I'm talking about material you've never experienced before, and yet you're able to understand and assimilate everything I'm saying. You can grab a word I'm saying and attach a meaning to it with such rapidity that you don't even need to struggle over it. How is that possible? The chapter asks. The way that we've come to understand this is through the cohort model of word recognition. The cohort model is suggesting that as we begin to say a word, all the possibilities that that word could finish out to be are activated in our mind. They're all activated. So for instance, if we start with the word canister, but we just say cat could end with cat or cap or cast or can or cash or cad or camp or cab or cattle. I mean, there's just an enormous list right there, and many others, it says in table 7.1. But once we say can, then it could be can, candidate, candelabra, canteen. It restricts the list down to words that begin with can. But when we say canne, then there's basically only two possibilities, canister or cannibal. But finally, when we say canist, that restricts it down to canister, and there's basically only one word left that it could be. But in our brain, when the first letter of that sound is said, when we first perceive just the beginning of that sound, faster than we can possibly imagine, our brain is already rummaging through hundreds of possibilities of what that word could end up being. And the reason why we know this is because if you start a word and you stop it midway through, then people performing the lexical decision task are able to recognize that the end of that word could have been such and such or such and such or such and such. What I mean by that is, if we start a word like, we'll just stick with the same example, we'll stick with canister. If we say can and we stop, then individuals are primed with any of the words that could end with can. Can, candidate, candelabra, canteen, Canada, they're all primed. And if we used any single one of them on the lexical decision task, they would be faster to recognize those as words than they would a different word. That suggests that all of those words have been activated somewhere in the brain. So we're always trying to go through lists of possible candidates for a word. This probably leads to some errors from time to time, but mostly it allows us to be super fast as we process spoken language. Another example that demonstrates that the cohort model is how we process words is given on page 254. You can see in this image here, there's a grid with several pictures of different objects. There's a beaker, a speaker, a beetle, and a carriage. Interestingly, if you tell somebody to pick up the beaker and put it above the triangle, as soon as you say the word beaker, look at the graph here. The time that it takes to say the word beaker starts from 0 and takes until 400 milliseconds, which is about 4/10 of a second. Less than a second it takes to say beaker. But from the beginning of the word beaker up to the end of the word beaker, where 400 milliseconds, where that average target offset line is, already people's gaze has focused on the words, on the picture of the beaker and the beetle. And if you average across participants, they are equally likely to look at the beaker or the beetle until after the word is finished. But as soon as the word is finished, their eye gaze stops looking at the beetle, which is that sort of teal color, and focuses almost exclusively on the beaker, because that's the word that's been said. And the probability that we would see a participant's eyes on the beaker after that statement has been said rises dramatically with each passing part of that second, as the rest of that second concludes, right? Until nearly 100% of participants are looking at the beaker at the end of 1 second. Now, if you go to, if you skip ahead a couple pages to page 259, you can see here that there's another line that we didn't talk about. It's the rhyme, speaker. Speaker, the speaker is indeed looked at by some participants a little bit. The probability that somebody would look at the speaker rises above carriage a little bit, but only after the whole word has been said, and it's not very pronounced, but it's still there. So some people, for just a brief moment of time, look at the speaker when we say to look at the beaker. And the reason for that is that we're trying to always reconcile different possibilities in our mind, but this is, as I said, just a really small effect, and it may be that it's contributed to by these mondegreen phenomena, I should say. So, as you recall from the reading of the text, a mondegreen is a slip of the ear. It's something that we misunderstood. We thought we had heard correctly, but we ended up in the end not actually hearing it as correctly as we thought. It's possible, though I don't know for sure, that when we see some participants looking at the word, at the picture of the speaker in response to the command to look at that beaker, that might be a mondegreen effect, that people weren't sure what they heard and that they needed to verify which of two possible things they thought they heard.